Danny Flex, and delighted to welcome back Lou DiBella for the latest edition of DiBella's Digest. We might as well just call it regular programming now. It's been going for around half a year, I think. So happy days.
True.
I mean, not in the wider context, but certainly for us every Wednesday. How are you doing, Lou?
Other than I don't sleep, I'm fine. I've become like a vampire. I can't sleep. So other than that, though, I'm okay. I mean, I'm running on adrenaline and probably not my healthiest self because I am literally not sleeping. But otherwise, I'm okay.
Not in the pool this week, sadly for you and probably a section of our female viewers.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said you're not in the pool this week, which is sad for you and probably some of our female viewers.
Actually, they're probably celebrating, actually. But no, I'm not in the pool today. It's actually sort of overcast and yucky out.
We had a bit of a thing. Well, we didn't have a bit of a thing. I had a bit of a thing on social media with female boxer Ebony Bridges, but we're going to save that till the end of this conversation because a few other stories have broken over the past couple of days that I want to get your take on first. And I guess the main one was something I only found out about earlier today, which is the ongoing saga between Golden Boy Promotions and DAZN, with Canelo kind of the tug of war prize in the middle of that dispute. And from what I read, and I'm certainly not close to the situation, it seems that DAZN aren't entirely happy with the level of fights they've been getting from Canelo thus far for his guaranteed minimum stipend. Whereas Golden Boy believe they've fulfilled everything they need to and want their minimum once again for next time Canelo fights.
You know, I think that when they made the deal with Canelo, they thought they were bargaining for Triple G, and they didn't cover themselves adequately contractually. And I think it's a thorn in their side to a huge extent that they haven't gotten that fight. And they bought some shitty Canelo fights, but then again, they also bought fights where they paid a fortune for the opponent. So was Rocky fielding an inferior fight? 100%. That wasn't justified by $35 million for that. But it's hard to argue that Danny Jacobs and Kovalev weren't big fights when they paid double digits of millions and were involved in negotiating the fights themselves. So that surprised me a little bit by what I read this morning because I know DAZN was very involved in those fights. That being said, are any of those fights really a major? Now, in the old days when Canelo was on pay-per-view, I still think that Kovalev would have been a pay-per-view, and I think Danny Jacobs would have been a pay-per-view. So it's hard for me to say those weren't meaningful fights, but they're not Triple G. And if the point here really is that I needed the locomotive of Triple G, I think maybe that's what's between the lines, that I never bargained for spending all this money and not getting the Triple G fight. I'm guessing that's my best guess because I'm not in the middle of this and I really have no knowledge.
But then surely they should have specified Triple G rather than Premier Opposition or whatever the term was in the initial contract.
I mean, I think that I haven't seen the contract, honestly. So it's hard for me to comment without knowing what exactly the language of the contract is. So I don't want to go there. I think there's always been, I could tell you this as an ex-television executive, there's always been a rub between promoters and television entities or media entities over opponent approval and equality of fights, etc. Because even when we had opponent approval when I was at HBO, it would be arguments a lot of the time. I also think sometimes you make an argument when you're as part of a negotiation. We are in a pandemic. There are no gates. I mean, it affects Canelo and Triple G to a huge extent because where Canelo can generate a double-figure $1 million gate, I mean, you're leaving that money on the table when you fight. So, and that's money that's not potentially not coming back to DAZN or the promoters. So it might be just this position as part of a negotiation, but I'm really not in the middle of it, and I haven't seen the language, and it's hard for me to comment on it. Though I will say that when you pay double digits of millions to an opponent and you give them multi-million-dollar guaranteed fights if they lose, how do you argue later that you did that and it wasn't a premier fight? Now, by the way, maybe you were wrong and it wasn't a premier fight because the worldwide audience didn't react to it like a big fight. But that's sort of like 2020 hindsight, you know. But I don't want to get in the middle of something when I'm not looking at what was, you know, what's on paper, etc. My gut tells me this is an ongoing negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, the other issue is that there were all those rumours circling not too long ago about DAZN having internal restructuring, about there being issues financially, whether they wanted to remain in boxing, whether the parent company wanted to remain with DAZN as a going concern. And then this breaks.
I don't think right now there's any reason to think they're not going to remain as a going concern. I don't. I don't think they're going away. I think they have a lot invested in this, and they've also performed pretty well in a number of markets. But certain markets are not among them. They have not performed very well in the American market. And I definitely think there is going to be a recharacterization of what's important to them. But that's what businesses do when they have to force to adapt to the marketplace. You know, now that the DAZN app is being marketed and sold as a global app. So I think they're going to have a much more global approach. And it certainly appeals to me that they're not going to continue to throw good money after bad on the U.S. market. Not to say that they're disappearing. I don't think they're going to disappear from this market. I just think clearly there's a readjustment in the works because it's self-evident.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is the WBO, and more specifically, a couple of mandatory contenders who have been told, one officially, one mooted, that they're going to get their shot next up. And the way this prevents potentially some undisputed title fights taking place. One being
well,
Jack
I mean,
Catterall.
look, I got to be honest with you, though. If they're going to do this, just do it fairly and across the board. I'm not someone that stands in opposition of mandatories. However, the problem is these organizations can pick and choose what they impose and what they don't. And they do it most of the time. And generally, to be honest, it's a bigger issue when they're allowing unifications and stuff, because a lot of really quality opponents have to sit there and wait for way too long. But right now, I sort of think what the ratings organizations are doing most of the time is what the money dictates they should do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one because we all want to see the mandatory contenders, if they've earned their position, get their shot. But as boxing fans, when that desire gets in the way of seeing Spence Crawford as an example, I mean, not in this case, but in this case, Taylor Ramirez.
No, but it's not. Taylor, well, first of all, if you believe that, look, Taylor Ramirez makes 0 sense with no crowd. Period. Stop. If Bob fucking wanted to make Taylor Ramirez right now, you really believe that the organizations would impose mandatories and cockblock it? They might be doing Bob's bidding. You don't know. The fuck? You think he's Mother Teresa? I mean, I don't blame him either, by the way, because if it's economically not viable, it's not viable. So, you know, I mean, look, you're not going to argue with a mandatory. You're not going to argue against a mandatory if you're in a position where doing the fight that can't happen is not financially viable anyway. So my gut tells me if we were in a normal world right now and they could do Ramirez and Taylor somewhere that they could do a multi-million-dollar gate, I believe the fight would happen. And I don't think the mandatories would stop it. I mean, look, let's face it. Who has power with the? I can't even get a guy in the. I mean, who has power with the organizations? It's who can make them money at that point in time.
Yeah.
You know, and I really, you know, look, I don't think it's a big deal that a mandatory is being imposed on Taylor or Ramirez. Frankly, if that's what's happening, I don't think that's a big deal because I don't think it's stopping the fight. I think the fight's not happening because there's no gate. And, you know, right now, Ramirez just fought, and it was a tough fight. I actually thought it could have gone either way. Taylor has a fight ahead of him, right? A mandatory coming?
Kong Song, mandatory.
Okay, he has that coming. But I don't think you're going to see them fight each other in an empty room. I don't buy that.
And is it a similar situation then with Joshua and Fury? I mean, Joshua's already got a mandatory, hopefully by the end of this year against Pulev. And now the WBO are saying they're probably going to impose.
Joshua and Fury is not happening in COVID world. I said that 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, and last week, Danny. And I still believe it. Joshua Fury is not happening in COVID
6
world.
months ago, did you still think we'd be in COVID world now?
You know what? I didn't know what to think. I still don't know what to think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, maybe we were overly ambitious, maybe we were naive, but I think a lot of people thought we'd be out of it by now, or at least coming out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. And hey, come on, Donald Trump's my president. Nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, he's not your president. He's the
No, he's not
country's
my president,
president.
but he is the country's president, and over here, and nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, there's an election coming up. I don't know if you've heard, so I'm sure you'll be hoping that he gets thrown out. Although the latest prediction was he's going to lose the popular vote but win the electoral college. Is that in line with what everyone's saying?
I don't know, man. I'm at the point. I mean, why is there even an electoral college? That's a whole other argument. Yeah, but I don't know what the predictions are. I think we've set up a very dangerous. Really, what the Republican Party is trying to do. I don't want to get into politics, but to get very brief, what the Republican Party is trying to do is basically say, if you don't want, you got to reelect Donald Trump to solve the problems created by Donald Trump. And right now, the whole climate of fear and hate and distrust that exists in the United States, Joe Biden's not president. It's not. I mean, to sit here and somehow try to blame this on the party that's not in power is pretty weird. But that's neither here nor there.
It's very similar to British politics.
I hate to say this, but when boxing's makes more sense than the world does, I'd rather talk about boxing.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Well, let's talk about the debate that I had then with Ebony Bridges. We alluded to it earlier. It was last week, I think we filmed it, end of last week on SecondsOut. I don't know if you've seen the full video or just the clip that was posted on Twitter. But we basically talked about the effect on women's boxing of selling sexuality, basically, using sexuality as a marketing tool for female boxing.
But how many, let me ask you a question. Is sports part of the entertainment business?
Yes.
Okay. How many physically unattractive leading men are there in the movies or television? How many physically unattractive leading women are there in television? How many unattractive pop singers are there, relatively speaking, to the giant number of pop singers that are out there? I mean, we've always looks sell, sex sells. It's part of the just how people think and what people respond to. And women have gotten, in my mind, an unfair shake. They get paid less for the same jobs. They get way fewer opportunities. It's a double-edged sword being an attractive woman, because on one hand, unattractive women are even worse off by statistics because they have a harder time getting hired and getting opportunities. But then attractive women who do get hired and are good, people are constantly saying that their success relates to their attractiveness. And if the woman happens to have dresses, well or provocatively and is let me use the vernacular, is hot, it's a double-edged sword. Like, they're taken less seriously, but maybe it also does create more opportunity. But you know what? I'm of the belief that I completely understand why a woman in boxing right now would want to take advantage of anything they could possibly take advantage of. And here's the bottom line when it comes to Ebony, and I like Ebony. Ebony and I have chatted. Maybe that's a little bit why I came to her defense this week, because I've gotten to know her a little bit. She takes boxing seriously. She works very hard. I haven't seen her in a meaningful fight because she hasn't had one yet. Like I said on Twitter the other day, it's going to become obvious pretty quickly if she can fight or not. If she can fight, then her sense of humor, her sex appeal, her boobs, all that stuff that people are complaining that she uses to her benefit. If she can fight, fuck it. She should be using it to her benefit. And if she can fight a little bit, enough to be a contender, she should still be using it to her benefit. And if she can't fight, and if she can't fight, yeah, that's when it's not. That's where it's not great for the women's game. It's not great for the women's game if a woman that has no talent, that's not able to compete, is getting opportunities because she's good looking. Now, that has happened. It happened more when I was first in boxing 25 and 30 years ago, because the talent pool was much weaker. Now the talent pool is strong. But look, I remember Mia St. John had to put up with a lot of shit because she sold sex appeal. She's a good-looking girl, good-looking woman now, but always been a good-looking woman. But she was good-looking, super good-looking as a young fighter, and she was in Playboy, and she used her sex appeal to her advantage, which I had no problem with. But then when Mia had to show that Mia needed to fight, Mia was a warrior, and Mia threw down. So Mia, in my mind, Mia proved herself in the ring. And at that point, so what, she wanted to use sex appeal. She was attractive. She used it to her benefit. A woman, you know, and here's the other thing, Danny, you're not the kind of person, like, I don't see you out there making comments, derogatory comments about women's looks. But I've been on social media enough in women's boxing to see where comments have gone up there about someone looking like a butch lesbian or a dyke or ugly or this or that. And so, like, what? I mean, people look like what they look like. You shouldn't be ripped apart for not being particularly physically attractive, but you also shouldn't be diminished because you use your looks or sex appeal as a marketing tool. And by the way, Oscar didn't use what made him the Golden Boy. It wasn't just the gold medals. He looked like a movie star. I mean, why does Ryan Garcia have millions of social media followers? Yeah, he's a good fighter, but believe me, there are fighters just as good or better than him that don't have anywhere near those kind of followings. So sex appeal, look, demeanor, whatever you can use, whatever might be particular to you that makes you stand out and makes you more marketable, well, why not use it? And I don't really believe that, I don't buy into the argument that until a woman starts making a lot of money when she's clearly inferior to her opposition and doesn't belong on TV, the women that are professional or, you know, had amateur careers and are turned pro and work hard or whatever, if they have the ability to use sex appeal as a selling tool in this marketplace, considering how badly women are getting fucked by the lack of opportunity and the lack of any sense of fair pay, etc., if they're going to use looks to their advantage, God bless them. And they will, like I said, at some point, whether or not they can fight is going to be self-evident, and they're going to have to deal with that, whether or not they're able to use their looks to their benefit.
All right, I'm going to have to work out a way of not letting Ebony see this video now.
I have a feeling she'll find her way to it.
I have a feeling she'll be delighted. But that's fair enough, you know.
But I want to tell you something, too. In fairness to Ebony, too, I mean, I follow her because she's amusing. And it's not just the looks or the boobs. It's how she has fun with it. And, like, you know, I mean, some dude that's trying to pay a female to send dirty athletic socks is sort of grotesque to me. However, I do find it amusing that she sold them. I thought it was hilarious that she did it, and I don't blame her, and then talked about it. I thought it was funny. She has a sense of humor. The girl has a great sense of humor, and she's obviously bright. She's not a dummy. You know, I thought her interview with you was, like, on both ends, I thought it was an interesting watch. So, you know, until I have a reason not to be, I'm a fan of hers.
That's fair enough. I'm not going to fall out with you over it, Lou.
No, and by the way, we can have, like, you know what I liked about that interview, by the way? I liked the fact that you respectfully stated your position and she did the same. And you actually had a back and forth where you clearly didn't agree at all, but there was a back and forth that was at the very least respectful with a modicum, with some intelligence. You know what I mean? And part of what we got to do in the world today also is we can disagree on shit, but let's be civil and human and intelligent about how we communicate. Because also I think that I have a feeling I think she understands your point of view. I don't think you're coming from, I don't think you're totally a hater. I get what you're trying to say, but I also really believe that boxing, like every other sport, is a subset of the entertainment business. You know, Damian Lillard might be the best, in my mind, he's one of the best couple of basketball players in the world right now. And he's certainly one of the biggest stars in America. He happens also to be a pretty good hip hop artist. I mean, he's talented, right? That's a big plus for him. And I think that helps him. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys wearing Dame Lillard gear, not only because he's a great player, because he's a great player. He's a decent, nice guy, carries himself like a really good human being. And he You know, he's also a rapper and a hip hop artist. And if stuff like, if you have those extra added qualities that make you more attractive as an entertainer, then you got to use them to your benefit. And I mean, I get the argument, and I get even the feminists that take it in my look. I think a true feminist would say a woman has a right to do whatever the fuck she wants and to sell herself however the fuck she wants. Now, there are some others I've heard that take that position. Well, this is again, you know, no, it's really not, because honestly, men have always used everything they have in their arsenal to their advantage. Women pretty much have always done the same, even though their opportunities have been more limited and they've had to face a lot more bullshit than we have as men historically. So I'm just not troubled by it.
That's fair enough. I look forward to the day when you rush to my defense on Twitter over something else.
I mean, if I agree
That's
with
it,
you,
I'm just jealous. That's all it is, really. I'm just jealous. Your affections have gone to another. No, it's fine. You're still welcome back next week, Lou. It's okay. We're still friends.
All right. Well, I'll be planning on it. Anything
Great
else
stuff.
before we jump off? Anything else going on in boxing? Anything else over there?
No, not really. I mean,
I'll tell you one thing I want to leave people with, though, and this is nobody's fault really, but it's gonna fuck up the apple cart. It's gonna the fights, some of the fights we're not seeing weren't going to happen anyway, but there absolutely are fights that are going to be delayed because of COVID and the lack of a crowd and the lack of that revenue stream. But you're going to see some major fighters going to get knocked off the pedestal for a fight that we didn't even want to see. Now, you know, you could argue that happened to Dillian, though I always thought that Povetkin was risky and I never really understood the fight. But I think you're going to see more of that, because a lot of fighters now are training and preparing for fights that are more the booby prize. And then those fights are going to be fought in a very weird environment, without a live crowd, without all the usual bells and whistles. You're going to see more fucked up results as the quality of the fights improves.
Well, that's a somber note to leave the audience on, but appreciate the insight.
Maybe, but it also leads for entertainment, because upsets are entertaining, you know. But I think you'll see, you know, there are going to be some fighters that just maybe don't get quite up the same way for a fight that they really is more of a keep busy fight, or you know, you're treading that line between not wanting to do the huge fight but not wanting to do a really shitty fight. So you do a fight like a Povetkin and a Dillian White, where, you know, obviously that wasn't a horrible fight on paper. You know, Povetkin had you know, always had a puncher's chance in that fight. He's always been a strong guy and a top contender. So I just think you're going to see more upsets as the quality of the fights get better.
Great stuff. We'll really appreciate that, Lou.